Hello, I'm Karen Rispin. I would like to tell you a little bit about the lower limb function questionnaire and its history and what you might find it helpful for. It is basically a question that says, how well do your legs work? It's available, open access for download at that website, and it's quite simple to use. So let's go through it and see a little bit about it. The history of it, it began at LeTourneau University. I ended up working with one of the professors in the engineering department with a project to develop a polycentric knee for use in low resource areas. They called it the LEGS project. One of my students had gone to Kenya where I grew up with that project, and I ended up supervising her in the research back on campus and asked, what do I need to do to go to Kenya? I was told write a grant, and I thought, okay. I was so new to academia, and I was surprised that the grant was funded. In it, we had promised to do outcomes measures. I cared passionately about how well something worked in the field because I had grown up in Kenya and I had seen well-intentioned people bring and provide or give away stuff that actually did harm. So I didn't want to have anything to do with a knee that actually didn't work in the country. So I started working very hard to figure out how to do proper scientific comparative outcomes for polycentric knees, or knees, prosthetic knees, with the LEGS project. Later on, I moved on to do this with wheelchairs, and now I manage the Assistive Technology Catalyst project. The goal of this was to provide valid evidence for research studies. The measure we developed wasn't in any way to compete or replace clinical assessment. It was a way to find data that we could say, this knee works and this knee doesn't in these particular situations. That was the goal, to give people a voice, to say what worked for them and what didn't. And we did this with teams of undergraduates. As I said, we really wanted to give a voice to prosthetic orthotic users in low resource areas. That's where we started from. We wanted to know whether this particular knee worked well in Bangladesh and Kenya, where we had taken it. Those were the goals. We wanted data specific enough to highlight functional issues that could be addressed by design changes at two different levels, at the design level of initial design and manufacturing and individual modification and repair. This is a picture from Bangladesh where I'm working with a man who just received the knee. And after they had had the knee for some time, we wanted to see how it worked for them. We did use other measures when we were looking at how well the knee functioned. The engineering team were the ones that were most interested in things like structure, materials, and so on, where I ended up dealing with the human interface with things like oxygen consumption, time walk test, gait analysis. And we also tried some of the existing measures to look at how well their assistive technology or their mobility was working. We found that we did try to take these things overseas, but the gait analysis and the oxygen consumption were very, very awkward and not something orthotics prosthetics clinic could use regularly, very easily in most low-income country locations. We needed something that was brief, simple, and clear to use, because the prosthetists and orthotists are busy people focused on helping people. They're going to be the ones that essentially administer or give the questionnaire to their clients who are verbal and able to complete a questionnaire. So we needed something that was brief and very much clear and to the point. Long-term tracking is difficult, so we wanted a snapshot because we wanted to just be able to get data in the window we were there and to get data that could influence design improvements. So many of where we were, people were speaking English as a second language, so we needed simple, clear wording. And this is even more important when you go where you're going to have to translate it. We haven't yet translated this particular questionnaire. We've translated some of the other ones you'll find on this website, but not this one. And we needed an intuitive, very easy to understand rating system because we found that many of the Likert scales and so on were harder for people to understand. We did this in 2 or 3 week trips with undergraduates, and so we needed to be able to collect data from a batch of people in a timely way and have it simple enough that undergrads could manage and publish the data and have it actually be meaningful. One thing we really struggled with when we began was that we could see, and people were saying, that there was a difference between the different needs, but many of the measures are so impacted by the person's own level of disability that any small difference between the need was clouded by that. So we needed to do comparative studies, first of all. So, for example, if you had a running shoe and you wanted to know if it's better than another running shoe, and you randomly had 40 people use it, from your grandmother to your kid, to your cousins and so on, how far they went in the time walk test would be more dependent on their age and fitness level than on the running shoe. But if you had them do it with one running shoe in the same situation and the same person with another running shoe, that's called repeated measures, and we could evaluate that with repeated measures ANOVA. So we wanted to have it comparative like that to tease out the difference. We also needed a type or model study design that would produce parametric data suitable for parametric analysis. In other words, data that can be on the curve. And in a lot of struggle with this and looking, we found that the visual analog scale generally is considered suitable for parametric statistical analysis. We also wanted to have mixed methods, so they could say what was wrong. We wouldn't just find out it was hard to go downstairs without finding out why it was hard to go downstairs. So each comment is going to have a qualitative and a quantitative aspect. And we often use it in conjunction with the 6-minute time walk test, which is a long validated thing that was objective external data as well as the feedback from the people involved. So in the whole scheme of things, are we really so different? There are statistical methods that are more likely to discern meaningful difference, and we wanted to choose that. Mixed methods, parametric, and so on. So we developed, after much struggle, a patient report tool to give users of prosthetics and orthotics the ability to provide input. This is a picture from Bangladesh. And we tried it out and practiced with something on campus that we thought would have a small enough difference that it should, if we could discern that difference, we could discern differences between prosthetic limbs. And that's what we were working on. It also works with orthotics and so on. So we did it with the Bledsoe extender base, a knee brace, locked straight and locked at slightly flexed. And we had 30 different volunteering university students walk on the gait mat with oxygen consumption, but also doing this particular questionnaire. We did the time walk test, and it could discern the difference. And there's a conference paper we published in 2012. We also did some preliminary validation and published it at it's a couple of different conferences in ISPO and RESNA in 2010 and 11. So you can see we worked hard on this. But then things changed, and I began to focus on wheelchairs because of a shift in what was going on at LeTourneau. The knee project went elsewhere. It's now called the LIMS knee, if you want to go look at it. It's a polycentric knee. And I focused on wheelchairs, so I didn't do much more. And several years later, I was approached by Dr. Jan Andrusek from the University of Toronto, who had developed a different knee designed for use in low-resource countries. Legworks is where that knee is available. And at that time, he wanted to finish validating that. And he had looked in the literature and found our conference papers. And he said, can we finish validating this measure? Can we do that together? And we did. So we validated it, the LLFQ, as an outcomes measure for those who use orthotics or prosthetics or have compromised gait. But you have to be able to walk. We needed to confirm different types of validity. Construct validity compares the outcomes from one measure to another that it should move in parallel with. So we did the time walk test, and we did oxygen consumption. We took a gait right mat to Kenya, and we took that data. And we also checked retest reliability. At the secondary school at Joytown, there are many students with mobility challenges who can walk. And we had them do the gait right mat, the time walk test, and the oxygen consumption, and then they twice did the lower limb function questionnaire. And we did it twice to see, that's called test-retest reliability. Is it going to come out about the same both times? So these were all standard ways to validate it. So we published the results of our studies. It was first presented at the International Society for Prosthetics Orthotics meeting, and then it was published in Disability and Rehabilitation Assistive Technology. So those are well-recognized academic institutions and journals. So it's validated. So let me tell you a little bit about it. We had initially used school grades as a shared understanding because it just happened that the students at Joytown used a similar school grading system to what my students were used to at Laterno. We've found out since then that that isn't true in many places. There are different school grading systems. It worked well for us because the students at Joytown understood school grades as an anchor under the visual analog mark. You didn't mark the school grades, you marked anywhere along the line. But then we realized we did need to have a rating system that was more broadly understood. And it became clear that we needed something that was less variable between cultures. Emoticons or facial expression are pretty much universal in all human communities. And they're widely available now. So, and it's not that no one has used this as anchors under a visual analog scale. The widely used Wong-Baker pain rating scale has something similar. So we decided to use emoticons as anchors under the visual analog line. So first it looked like this, the top line, and the reason it has EF, because in the failing grade in Kenya was actually different, but the rest of the grades were the same. So you rate how your gait looks while walking, from poor, very abnormal, to excellent. And then there's a scale you mark anywhere along the line. It emphasizes that in the instructions, and you make a comment. Then we move to this, because this is more universally understood. The emoticons are more universally understood, so that it can be used in any culture. So translating it won't have to include redoing the school grades under the line. So it has a visual analog scale for quantitative data suitable for ANOVA, emoticons to provide intuitive understanding. Everybody understands facial expressions pretty much. A comment for each question to provide qualitative data. It can be done as a snapshot in time. It's talking about how well your legs are working for you with the device you have on at the moment. And there are brief, clear questions. So here's the instructions. We would like you to compare your lower limb function and movement to that of a person of your age and gender who does not have a physical disability or need an assistive device. Answer each question by placing a vertical mark anywhere on the line as shown below. Do not circle the emoticon faces that are below the line. They are only a reference point for placing your mark. You can mark anywhere along the line, including between the emoticons as shown below. There is no right or wrong answer, just give the answer that best describes you and your experience. Please explain your score in the comments section below each line. So we put an example at the top that had nothing to do with the questions on it. It wasn't part of the questionnaire, but it showed how to answer it. An example showing how to answer. Rate the difficulty of getting into a commercial airplane from poor, very difficult, to excellent, not difficult at all. And as you can see, he kind of marked it a little bit positive. And he says, my leg is stiff and swings forward slowly, so I am slower than most people, but I can do it successfully. That was the comment. Here's the actual questionnaire. As I have said, it's there for free download. And the information in the header here is the information that we needed to collect. It's not meant to be their clinical records or anything else, and you can replace those questions if you have a different question you're asking for your particular study. The validated part is the actual questions in the questionnaire. We had in there a condition of device, type of device, and so on, because we were looking at that in the original study. So here you have the questions. Rate how your gait looks, rate how you sound, rate your comfort. Now we did pain separately because people will respond in ways that are revealing, we found after many times of doing this, to these questions. Rate how balanced you feel from standing, how balanced you feel from walking. Well, walking, those are two different aspects, especially with prosthetic knees or any kind of leg brace that includes a knee. How often you fall, how exhausting it is to walk as long as you need to, how much energy it takes. They responded a little differently to those two different questions. They might say, hey, I'm in good shape, I don't get tired, but yeah, it does take a lot of energy. How about walking around obstacles in narrow spaces, especially some knees that are a little less stable while moving or hard in narrow spaces? Or any bracing or anything, rate how awkward it is, because that's a little different than difficulty. Sometimes you can do it, but it's just plain awkward. How difficult to go downstairs, upstairs, down a hill, up a hill, because they're again different skills. Sit down and stand up, get in and out of a motor vehicle, run. A lot of people can't run, but a few can, so we included that. On uneven terrain, and overall, how satisfied are you with the function of your lower limb? So that's the questionnaire. This is how you score a question. If you look online, you have two formats. You can print letter format or A4 format. Depending on the country you're in, the paper is letter paper and the printers are letter paper in the US and Canada. In many other countries, they're A4 format. So select the one appropriate to your country and printer so you get 10 centimeter lines, because that's important. So you measure from the bottom of the line to the vertical mark the person has made, and you get a number like 6.7 centimeters. And then you enter the number in a comment in a spreadsheet. You can also just keep the questionnaire in the patient's records too. Here's an example of data for one person. And as you can see, this was a young male with a polycentric knee, and he found it a lot easier to go upstairs than downstairs. Up and downhill were different. It was easy to sit down and stand up. Vehicles were good because he could bend his knee. How it looks was sort of okay. How it sounds, not so good. You can see he was pretty happy with his standing balance, but not as happy as his walking balance. And this tells you a little bit how he perceives the function of the knee. And then when you look at the comments, you can kind of see why. And the comments are often the things that allow you to actually make a change that will benefit the client. Like it says, sitting down and standing up is okay because the knee bends well. Here's a set of data to show the kind of data set that we generated when we were doing the test validation. You can see we've got diagnosis, and we had people that had other challenges for walking as well, like people with cerebral palsy and so on, to give insight on the function of their legs for them and how they perceived it. So it doesn't have to be above-knee prosthetics, orthotics, or any gait challenges. We didn't validate it with crutches, but it could be done that way. But it is designed for those who can walk. So thank you for your time. I hope that you will find this helpful in your practices and in your research projects, and we can improve the devices provided for people with disabilities around the world. If you have any questions, please feel free to go to our website at www.atcatalyst.org, and there's contact information there. You can email me with questions.